Welcome all. My name is Madeline Snow, and I'm from the University of Massachusetts in Lowell. And this is number 5 in a webinar series for food and beverage businesses. I'd like to thank EPA Region 1 for their support and pollution prevention grants to support this work. I'd like to specifically thank Lauren Madison from UMass Amherst for all of her support and patience. And thank you, Cynthia Nelson from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, who has offered to offer some of her insights and reflections along the way. So one of the goals of this webinar series is just for you to hopefully take away one idea or one action or one question from each of these webinars. We may not have all the answers, you may not have all the answers, but at least one of the themes is to ask the questions. So please continue to ask questions about how to reduce your environmental footprint, whether it's with energy, water, waste, or toxics use. It is being recorded, as you got that notice. And we're going to be going for about 40-45 minutes, and then I'll shut off the recording and I will keep the link open if we'd like to have some additional informal discussions. So, oh geez, here we go. Yeah. Here's my favorite food, bagels. We have one more webinar coming up in September. This is the third Friday of the month series. And we'll be talking about sort of reassessing, what we've learned and how to communicate some of your results, particularly. Okay. This is the infamous upside down hierarchy for pollution prevention. And the concept is that while 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we were all focused on the bottom of the pyramid, how to dispose or deal with the releases or other emissions. The concept is to be working on source reduction. And in this case, in terms of water, how to actually reduce the amount of water that we need to use in a particular operation or process. And one of our themes has been that pollution prevention is a business strategy, particularly in these challenging times. Another of my favorite foods, Lindt chocolates. These are two takeaways. One is that water may not be your highest priority in your operations, even in terms of your environmental footprint. Water rates vary greatly across the country. Water supply issues vary. But at least ask the questions about your current use and your current costs associated with that use. And the second is that water is not a standalone issue. There really is a water energy connection, and we'll talk a little bit more about the water energy and chemical cleaning connection as well. I'm going to hand it over to Lauren, if that's okay with you, Lauren, to go over some of the strategies and then go into more detail. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. We'll be very happy to try and address those as we go along. Thank you.
Okay, hi, Madeline, can you go to the next slide?
I'm trying. And it won't. There we go. No, that was mine. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks. Hi, I'm Lauren Madison. I work in the Center for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy at UMass Amherst. Sorry, on my screen. We are part of the U.S. Department of Energy's Industrial Assessment Center program, in which we offer free in-depth assessments of energy and resource use in manufacturing facilities. If you were in last month's webinar, you heard a lot more about that. And water is one of the things that we sometimes look at. So I'll be talking today about some things we've learned there. And oops, the slide just moved. We have 7 strategies that we are going to talk about to reduce your water use and water and sewer costs. And we can go to the next slide to get started with those. As we talked about last month, understanding your bills and your consumption of any resource is always a good first step. And water efficiency is an important component of sustainability, but people are busy and they need to prioritize their efforts. So if you are just getting started with your sustainability efforts, I recommend looking at your water and sewer costs in relation to other resources such as energy, and then prioritizing where you will start your efforts. Your water utility measures your total water use with a meter coming into your facility. But if you want detail on where water goes within your facility, there are sub-meters that can be installed to measure the flow of water to different areas. And doing something weird. On the next slide, I'll show some graphs that give you an idea of the typical breakdown of water use within restaurants and food processing facilities. Actually, Madeline, can you, sorry, go back. I wasn't done with that one yet.
Sorry,
It's okay.
I'm up to 5 now, blips on my part, thanks.
One other thing to think about when you are reviewing your bills is that in some facilities, the flow out to the sewer system is not directly measured. Instead, the utility bases sewer costs on the volume of water flowing into the facility under the assumption that the input and output are basically the same. This is not always accurate, especially in food and beverage facilities where some water may go into the products. So some utilities will adjust their charges if the customer installs a meter to measure the actual outflow. And we've seen cases where the savings potential from that can be tens of thousands of dollars a year. So you can take a look and see if your bills show the water and sewer volumes to be the same, and think about if you think that's reasonably accurate. And if not, you can contact your utility to check into ways to address that. Okay. So now the next slide. These show the breakdown, as I mentioned, in food processing and restaurants. So washing and sanitization, I'm not going to try to say that right, is one of the areas where water is used most in both types of facilities. And in food processing, heating, cooling, and process are other major areas. So on the next slide, we'll start talking about what you can do in some of those areas. Oops. Okay. A lot of the equipment in food and beverage businesses use water, and some models use it a lot more efficiently than others. So when selecting new equipment, one consideration should be how much water it uses as well as energy. And now we are going to hear from Cynthia with the New Hampshire Pollution Prevention Program, who has an example of where this has been something worth looking at.
Thank you. And again, thank you to Madeline for asking me to share some of what we've learned. Our program is on its second of a 2-year grant from the EPA to work with the food and beverage manufacturing industry. And we have been specializing in breweries and craft beverage producers. And there's a mid-size for New Hampshire brewery that we were working with. And they were concerned about the quality of their beer. They actually weren't looking into water efficiency at this moment. But, beer cans need to be rinsed prior to filling to get out any debris or any extraneous material that shouldn't be in the can. And typically they're rinsed with water, and it uses quite a lot of water that's often not reused. So this brewery chose to replace that canner with a canning line that rinsed the cans with an ionizing air rinse. And they were thrilled with the results. They save about 700 gallons of water every week. And this is just in a mid-sized brewery. So a huge difference. And they weren't as concerned as the cost of the water, but then after they did the replacement, they realized that the cost of their wastewater had drastically dropped. So this was a win-win on all fronts for this brewery. By swapping out this piece of equipment, they saved water, they reduced their wastewater flow greatly, and they improved the quality of their beer. Thank you. Back to you, Lauren.
Great, thanks, Cynthia. Somebody asked in the chat, I don't know if you can do this, but they asked if you can share the name of the brewery.
Our program is confidential, so we don't disclose that. I can tell you, however, there are several breweries in New Hampshire that do use that. So I'm sorry, I can't tell you, but ask at your local brewery.
Okay. And the next slide, Madeline, shows that there are smaller equipment changes that can improve water efficiency too, such as using efficient nozzles and pre-rinse spray valves and low flow aerators on sinks. If you don't know what an aerator is, this shows that it is the little attachment that goes at the end of the faucet, and you can substantially reduce water from sinks in the restrooms and break rooms using those, as these EPA graphics show. Those little changes can make a really big difference. And on the next slide, we talk about process modifications, which are another way to reduce water use. One example is looking at where you're using water for cooling. And single pass cooling is where the water is used once and then discharged to the sewer. Sometimes that can be replaced with a closed loop in which the water is recirculated. Another opportunity is making sure that water flows are turned off when not needed. And heating and cooling systems use water in a variety of ways, so they should be optimized for performance as well as efficiency of water and energy use. And that is a big topic that I'm not going to get into detail on today, except to refer you to some great EPA resources that are listed here. This guide goes into a good amount of detail on water use in heating and cooling systems. And there is also a webinar specifically on that topic here at the WaterSense website. They have a live version of that webinar coming up next month, and there's also a recorded version on there. So if you want to learn more about that, those are great places to look. And the next slide talks about maintenance. Regular cleaning of equipment, cleaning and maintenance is important to make sure that it's operating efficiently in terms of water and energy and just production. And there can be a lot of water lost through leaks. EPA actually has an annual Fix a Leak Week. So you can mark your calendars for that next March. I love their little slogan, leaks can run, but they can't hide. So that there's a national effort that week to repair water leaks, but you don't have to wait until then. Another resource is this calculator that helps to calculate how much leaks can actually cost you. And Cynthia, I believe you have another story for us about leaks.
Yes, thank you, Lauren. Again, another brewery we were working with, we were helping them to benchmark their utilities, so energy and water use, etc. And in the process of benchmarking, they noticed a sudden spike in their water use, and they didn't know what was causing it. And had they not been benchmarking, they might not have noticed that until they started to get bills that were significantly higher. So they started to track it down. They couldn't find any leaks. They hadn't done a process change in their brewery. They didn't know what was causing the spike. Well, like so many other breweries, it was located in one of those, the strip malls that have shared utilities. And this particular brewery just paid a certain percentage of the monthly bill, that was allocated to their water use. So they went looking. It turns out there was a water leak. It was not in their building, but since they paid a significant portion of the bill monthly that was going to affect them, it turns out that there was a toilet running. And just the toilet running caused this large spike in their water bill. And again, without them benchmarking, they wouldn't have noticed it. This would have gone on unnoticed for the business who had the leaky toilet. And it would have just been wasteful of water and cost everyone more more money. So that was our water leak story.
Thanks, Cynthia. And now we can go to the next slide. And Madeline, you can take it away.
That's for me. So this is just a little example of the connections between water, energy, and chemical use used for cleaning. So I don't know how many of you have clean in place operations or know of people, companies who rely on clean in place. But this particular business, sodium hydroxide is commonly used, and they were using it. But the question was there a way, and one of the issues was that there was really variability based on the operator at the time. So this relationship of how much of the chemical you're using, like what is it, to what extent is it being diluted and how much? And then what temperature are you using? And then for what length of time? But the idea was that they started to look at this as opposed to just assuming that everything was fine and there were no additional optimization or improvements that could be made. And UMass Lowell worked with this particular company and has worked with others to, again, review and ask the questions. One, to make it more consistent, but they found that there was a way to optimize, particularly in terms of the energy costs and temperatures, to make some adjustments. But if you're not asking the question about, well, why are we using X chemical at whatever percent, and why are we putting it at this temperature, and how come we're leaving it for this length of time, you can't really think about, are you being effective, and are there ways to optimize that operation? So again, just asking the question and taking a little bit of time to review and find out what's really going on, and are there any improvements that could be made. And the second is a true or false little quiz here. I'd love it if you put it in your chat, but you don't have to. This is not going to be graded. But one of the strategies in looking how to reduce your water use and associated costs is really to engage your employees. So true or false? Whoops. Everything we need to know about running our operations can be found in user manuals for our equipment. I don't understand why we need people. We just follow the directions. Is that true or false? Would anybody like to put in the chat their view of that? Next, let's see what we have here. Next. Losing the knowledge of seasoned employees has no effect on our operations whatsoever. Now, I guess depending upon the employee, that could be true or false. But here we go. True or false? Our employees know where to report water leaks and make other suggestions to reduce waste. And lastly, we regularly engage our employees in figuring out ways to reduce costs, improve our operations, and reduce our environmental footprint. The bottom line on this one is that the people who run these operations, our businesses, our facilities, can make them or break them. They know how these operate, how the processes run, and they do know the opportunities to improve, to save money, and reduce waste. And so think about just trying to have that conversation in terms of awareness or training, to look for and to feel comfortable coming forward with some suggestions. I've been in places where everyone said, oh, we want to engage personnel, we want to hear from them. And then as soon as somebody actually made a suggestion, they were shot down really hard. It's almost like worse to ask and then shun than to not ask at all. But anyway, think about the role of your personnel, your employees, in pollution prevention in general and in water specifically. Lauren, would you like to go over this one?
Yes, so we've talked about a lot of different, an overview of a lot of different things, and there are good resources that get into more detail on all of these. So EPA has great information. As I mentioned, the WaterSense program, can we get back to the previous slide? WaterSense has some guides and webinars and lots of good resources. The Energy Star program also, it's focused on energy, but also looks at water use. Madeline, can you get back a slide?
Mhm. Sorry.
EPA also. Oops.
Boy, I'm really cracking up the points.
EPA also has a lean and water toolkit that has some good information in it. The Industrial Assessment Center program that I mentioned, we do free assessments where we come visit food and beverage processing and other manufacturing facilities and give specific recommendations on ways to reduce energy, water, resource use. And that is my center's website, which is currently down, but will hopefully be fixed by next week. I'm working on it, something wrong with the server, and has a link to the centers that are around the country. Food Service Technology Center has a lot of information on commercial kitchen equipment. It's where I got that leak calculator. In New Hampshire, as Cynthia talked about, they're doing a lot of good work with businesses and breweries specifically. And there's some good resources on their website. And then check with your local utilities about what kind of assistance they offer. Even the energy efficiency programs, they sometimes look at reducing water because there is a connection between water and energy use, and some water utilities offer some support for efficiency. And I am putting all of those links in the chat. And that's all with that slide. The next slide just shows, if we can get back to the next slide, it shows some of the other sources that Madeline looked at for this presentation.
And we're going to go into some small breakout rooms. I was on a webinar with a whole bunch of people from Ireland, and I just loved that he was breaking us into wee breakout groups. So we're going to go into wee great breakout groups just for a few minutes. And the question really is, what have you heard so far that would that resonates with you, that you think, well, I'm going to try that, or I could try it, or I could suggest it to somebody that I'm working with, or that you've heard of. So it's really just about 8 minutes. And we'll just go in for a few minutes, introduce yourselves, and have a little conversation about some of the strategies that you have heard. There we go. And then I'll bring you back in. And we'd love to hear from people in the breakout groups in terms of what you discussed. Is there something that the larger group should know and learn from what you talked about in the group? And you can do that in chat, or you can just unmute yourself. It would be fine.
We had someone in our group remind us of the importance of maintaining steam traps, which again is one of those things, saves energy, saves water, and I think we often overlook that. So I really appreciated him bringing that up to our group, and I'm sure he could say more about it if anybody has questions. But yeah, it was a really good insight.
Great.
It's funny, people keep mentioning things that that didn't make it into the presentation, but it's great because we were trying to keep it to a relatively short length, but there's a lot more on the topic. So yes, steam trap maintenance is an important one.
And this is Rob from EPA. I gave a shameless plug for the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which was designed mainly or initially to track energy use, but it has since expanded to track water use as well as solid waste use. So it's actually it's a free tool, and it does a good job of you can put your benchmarks in and then track your facility performance.
Anything else that was brought up that we had missed, or that you would like to, really emphasize?
There was somebody in my group who mentioned some other things. Raviel, would you mind sharing a little bit?
Not at all. So we talked a little bit about pretty much reusing the water that we use for our process and reusing it for other things that don't necessarily need potable water. So bathrooms, toilets, clean in place water usage on the production floor, as well as possibly exploring rooftop water collection, especially when you have a bigger roof and whenever it rains, you might be able to use that water, treat it, and use it for things that you might need it for.
Thanks.
Can I just ask you, I can't believe that you are charged the amount of water that is coming in that's actually going out. You must have some way of figuring out and being charged less than what actually leaves your facility.
We're actually in a unique situation. We're not on public water, nor are we on public sewer. So
There you go.
technically, the only water we pay for is the water that we tanker in. But at the same time, we do sit on a spring, and that is our main source of business. So we do want to take care of it and make sure that we don't overdraw it.
Got it. Thank you.
And also there's probably some pumping energy that goes into bringing water in from the spring. So when you save water, then you save energy too.
Absolutely.
I just need one more. This is the time of the webinar where I beg. So I'm begging. I just need one more. Who will take pity on me? Nobody. Okay. Good enough. Good enough. Any general questions and answers for the speakers or from yourselves, whatever you'd like.
If people have attended other sessions as part of this webinar series, would be interested in hearing if you have any thoughts kind of after hearing about multiple topics on what you are going to look at in your facilities as businesses.
I have sort of a general thought or question or concept to pose maybe. My experience in discussing and working informally with breweries has been that I think most of them would very much be open to a lot of the ideas that we've discussed today and many other ideas. However, that said, the vast majority of breweries are pretty small in comparison to the small percentage of large breweries that have an actual paid position for someone who's a sustainability manager of sorts. So I'm wondering how, if at all, there might be some opportunity for either free counseling to get things started, or students who might be looking for some sort of a probably unpaid internship or something. I really feel like if the brewery had a person who could come in and kickstart some things at little to no cost, I feel like there would really be some real interest in that.
Yeah, and there are a lot of resources. I mean, it will still take some time from somebody at the business, but there are resources to help and to offer expertise. We have included some, I think, in every one of the sessions for this. One of them, as I mentioned, I work with the Industrial Assessment Center program, where we come into a site and do an in-depth assessment of energy, focused on energy use, but also look at water and other resources somewhat. So the very smallest breweries will not be eligible for that, but a lot of them are. Eligibility starts at facilities that have $100,000 a year in energy costs. And that's a national program where there's centers around the country. So that's one place. There also are programs through local utilities, as I mentioned,
Okay.
and a variety of other programs. So if you are looking at a specific area, we could definitely talk about, what's available there. But there are definitely some resources to help. And if others want to talk about some of the resources that you're involved with, feel free.
I don't know
Rob?
if any of the P2 technical assistance providers are on. I don't know if Kentucky is on, but there are P2 resource and technical assistance centers. And Cynthia, have you been doing work with interns at breweries? I just can't remember if it's New Hampshire or Vermont or Maine. You know, I'm from Massachusetts, so the rest of New England is just kind of
North
out there.
somewhere.
Yeah, we do not do interns, but we do go in and we provide some limited technical assistance to any business in New Hampshire that contacts us. And of course, right now we're reaching out to breweries, wineries, distilleries, and other craft beverage producers. And then if they need more technical assistance beyond what we're able to provide, we refer them to people like Lauren or the local utility or that sort of thing. Our local utilities are often able to provide a more in-depth assessment where we have some other programs, but we're a good place to start. And there's a lot of other states that if you contact their P2 program, that they do the same thing. They provide some technical assistance, and then they can refer you and make contacts for a more in-depth technical assistance.
It probably isn't as easy as it should be to find out
Right.
who the right person is and what resources are available. But any of us can certainly help you. And Rob from EPA Region 1, I'm sure you'd be willing to assist also.
Thank you.
Any other observations or questions?
This is Joe Malky again from EPA Region 2. I just want to emphasize how good is the relationship between, you're doing an assessment in the plant, but I believe the manufacturer has a big role, in terms of equipment substitution. For example, the plate heat exchangers, you can have very close approach temperature as opposed to shell and tube. Things like ammonia nitrogen cooling system, which can become toxic, could be replaced by cryogenic carbon dioxide cooling, which is more efficient. I mean, things like that. I guess the equipment manufacturer has a big role in terms of pollution prevention, waste management, energy reduction cost. So.
Hi, Madeline. This is Rob. I just want to say thanks for bringing people together. I just met another Rob Vanden Deal, and it's great that he's interested in beer and breweries in Massachusetts, and I know that that's something that I'm working on with a bunch of state agencies on the same project. So I can't wait to connect more with Rob. And so, anyways, thanks for convening all these people together.
And I just wanted to comment in terms of Joe's comment about the role of equipment manufacturers. For the most part, companies will respond to business demands. So if there's a demand for a change or a demand for something that's more efficient or greener, quote unquote, they do respond, and they have responded in many, many ways. But yes, not to overlook the equipment manufacturers. It's a combination of what equipment there is, how you use it, and how you think about using it and what the possibilities are. Any other questions or comments? And with that, I'm letting you out pretty early. I will shut off the recording, and if you'd like to stay on to have more informal conversations, that would be great. But I want to thank Lauren and Cynthia very much for their insights and for the presentations, and to all of you for sharing your experiences